My name is Haki Shakur. I'm the national spokesperson of the August 3rd Collective of the New African Independence Movement, which is a cadre of individuals, organization that was actually started within the prison system by the ancestor Sanyika Shakur, my mentor. I also work with other organizations within the New African Independence Movement, like George Jackson University, the Malcolm X grassroots movement, if people ever heard of that, and just several other specific organizations within the New African Independence Movement. But I'm also a New African historian. I do a lot of work on our story pertaining to the New African Independence Movement and the Republic of New Afrika, and just our story here within the Empire of the United States of America. I'm an advocate for political prisoners and prisoners of war. I've been doing that work for a little bit over, I would say 15 years now to almost 20 years now. And actually how I got involved within the New African Independence Movement was through my mentor and now ancestor, Sanyika Shakur. He brought me into the forefront. Him and Dr. Matulu Shakur, those individuals are the ones who brought me within this movement. They taught me about it. They educated me on the movement and things of that nature, on what is a New African and what is the New African Independence Movement. And then I actually, took the oath as a citizen, becoming a citizen of the Republic of New Afrika, the provisional government, in the early 2000s. I would say around the early 2000s and things of that nature. So that's how I got active. And also springboarding off of what we know today as the Jericho movement. They had a mass march in 1998, a historical march on DC for political prisoners and prisoners of war. It was the first thing that ever took place on that level, which was started by Jalil Mutakim, who was a New African prisoner of war, and Sophia Bukhari, who's an ancestor now, who was also a political prisoner of war of the New African Independence Movement. So that whole little Jericho movement, 98, is what introduced me to the New African Independence Movement. Basically, the provisional government of the Republic of New Afrika was, because a lot of people get it twisted. They think that the RNA is just an organization without understanding what the provisional government of the Republic of New Afrika, their goal, objective was, and things of that nature. So in 1968, this was a little bit after Malcolm X was assassinated. And things of that nature. He had some individuals who were comrades of his by the name of the Henry brothers. And the Henry brothers, over time, they changed their name to the Obadeli brothers. So it's Imari Obadeli and Gaidi Obadeli. And they had an organization called the Malcolm X Society, which they organized with some more individuals in Detroit at that point in time to carry on the torch and the legacy of Malcolm X. And that Malcolm X doctrine, which was, revolutionary nationalism, because it had went from nationalism to black nationalism. Then Malcolm X took it to revolutionary black nationalism. And so with a little sprinkle of Pan-Africanism in there as well, and things of that nature. So the Obadeli brothers, they organized this Black Government Conference in 1968, where over 500 individuals, militant individuals from several organizations, street organizations, and things of that nature, along with Queen Mother Moore. If people don't know who Queen Mother Moore is, I suggest them to research her as well. So her and the Obadeli brothers, and some more popular individuals people would know of, like Stokely Carmichael, H. Rod Brown, individuals of the Black Liberation Army was present, and just a bunch of Black Power movement organizations, if you want to label it like that, and Pan-African organizations as well. So when it happened on March 31st, 1968, the Declaration of Independence was signed. It's this document called the Code of Umoja. And this Code of Umoja introduced the Declaration of Independence. And so over 200 of those individuals signed this document. And when they signed the document, it was declaring African people of African descent, misnomer Black Americans who chose the new African identity, who chose on that day that we were actually not an independent nation, but declaring ourselves as a nation and going down that road and struggle of independence and sovereignty on this land that we seen as something that is, that it was the great direction that we needed to go in, springboarding off of Malcolm X's declaration as, human rights and things of that nature. So that's where the Republic of New Afrika comes from. And out of that, it is the New African Independence Movement, which is the organizations, cadres, groups, and things of that nature who are struggling for the independence of that nation, the Republic of New Afrika, and things of that nature.
Thank you. Yeah, that's helpful. And Robert F. Williams was it?
Yeah.
Right?
I keep, it's so many of them.
I know.
So many popular individuals that actually came that day and actually aligned with the movement. Sometimes I tend to leave a lot of them out. But yeah, Robert F. Williams was actually declared the first president at that Black Power conference that day when they established the cabinet of the Provisional Government of the Republic of New Afrika. He was the first president nominated. Because so many people, in the African diaspora, on the African continent, and even our people with, here in the United States of America, a lot of people get confused on why we chose New African and things of that nature. And, we had a lot of pushback because of that over the decades and things of that nature, even from our brothers and sisters on the continent who couldn't understand what do you mean by New African, because a lot of those concerned people of African descent and the Africans on the continent, they think we're stating that we're some kind of new African, or should I say an old African. But that's the biggest misconception. So when we're explaining this identity, this nationality, New African, what we're basically saying is that, and let me throw this in his way. Queen Mother Moore was actually the individual who came up with that identity, New African, because when she went to Africa, she was she went to Ghana. So when she went to Ghana, she was given this royal title by the Ghanaians as you're a queen mother. So when she got this title, Queen Mother, and when she came back to the United States of America and got with the Obadeli brothers, they was brainstorming on what should we call ourselves and things of that nature. So she just was like, hold on. So, that took a whole lot of study of our social development here in the empire, all the way from slavery all the way up until 1968. So as they studied that period of time in those generations, and things of that nature, they seen it as, okay, we are people that descend from Africans, but when we got on this landmass and we also going through this terroristic system called slavery, on the plantations, we started to develop socially amongst ourselves into a new people, at that point in time. And what we mean by that is just basically, okay, we know that our ancestors came from different African tribes, African nations, and things of that nature when they was brought over here. But when they was coming over here, whether you were Igbo, Mandinka, Yoruba, Fulani, Hausa, and all these different ethnic groups, right? Some of them were Muslims as well. We got to throw that in there. Some of them was Muslim captured, enslaved people and things of that nature. So all of them didn't speak the same language at first. So and I always use this example. If anybody's seen the movie Kuta Kinte, The Roots, like if you go look at that movie, it was a period in time in that movie, a part of that movie, when they all were on the ship and they couldn't communicate with each other. You know what I'm saying? So one of those enslaved individuals, he started to tell everybody on the slave ship, like, look, we all come from different ethnic groups, tribes, and things of that nature. But right now, we are one people. So let's try to communicate with each other. Let's try to talk to each other so we can overthrow our captees. You know what I'm saying? The individuals who are captors, things of that nature. So that's an example right there. You know what I'm saying? That whole development that we went through once we got on this landmass. And we resisted from the beginning on their slave ships, and when we got on that on the land, on this landmass and things of that nature. So when we get on this landmass, people gotta realize plantation slavery started to develop us and unite us under a common struggle. And that common struggle was, the struggle and the fight for liberation, the fight for freedom again. You know what I'm saying? Things of that nature. So all these people, and then we're going through this horrific system as well called slave breeding. So now we're procreating with each other and things of this nature and stuff like that. And we're now speaking a common language, which is English, but at some points of it, it still was broken, where combined African languages and things of that nature started to develop on these plantations. Spiritual systems, we try to keep our spiritual systems intact, our culture intact, and things of this nature. So that identity started to develop without a name. You see what I'm saying? We became a nation out of that common struggle. You know what I'm saying? On plantation slavery over the decades and things like that. So what we're basically saying is we're our extension of our African ancestors, not negating our African ancestors as some old Africans or things of that nature. No, we just chose this identity because we feel like it fits our reality. It fits our struggle. It fits our social development. It fits our revolution. You know what I'm saying? So it's a political identity. It's a cultural identity. It's a social identity, and it defines who we are. And that's under self-determination and our human rights to define who we are. So we chose New African. You know what I'm saying? And that's who we are in this place. And today, and, you can go into European history as well and take things out of the European history to try to explain what we're talking about as well. Because believe it or not, if people, if you're a real historian or a student of history, you can look at how the United States of America came into existence, even though it came into existence under terrorism and all these negative things of that nature. But when we go back to George Washington and look at those patriots, when they wanted to separate from the British crown and the British Empire, it's kind of that same thing. You see what I'm saying? It's like they were a new nation of Europeans because it was British people, it was other European identities and things of that nature that joined that revolution that the Patriots sparked on the British Empire. So you can go look at that to a certain degree too and see how what we're talking about. You see what I'm saying? But even though it's two different stories, it has similarities to it to where you can understand what we mean by this new African identity and independence and revolution and things of that nature. You can study that history too to understand where we're coming from. Man, the most important part to me, is this prison struggle. Because if we're talking about a prison struggle, again, it goes back to our historical social development on this landmass. Because the way we see it, because you got to look at it through a nationalist mind state, you know what I'm saying, a political consciousness of being a nationalist. Because if you see it through a nationalist eyes, then you'll realize, like, okay, look at the enslaved, captured African identities that were brought to these shores. People got to understand the transatlantic slave trade was an act of war. These nations went into this continent, went on this landmass, captured individuals, and when they went on that landmass, several of these groups also were at war at that point in time. We don't want to leave that out as well to confuse people. We know groups had differences. You know what I'm saying? So it was warfare going on the continent when these European nations went on the continent. So there were already political prisoners and prisoners of war established. So when this slave trade started to develop, these nations were capturing political prisoners and prisoners of war, some innocent, you see what I'm saying, from different tribes and stuff like that. But if you look at it from a nationalist development and a political thought worldview, when they brought these captured Africans over here, they were already political prisoners and prisoners of war. So when we get on this landmass, plantation slavery, that's an act of war. Those are political prisoners doing forced labor on plantation, things of that nature. So the new African prison struggle merges out of that, because when we get to up into the 1900s, you know what I'm saying, even into the early 1920s, we're starting to see this new African prison struggle develop, because now, as the slave system transformed into this system of prison system, jail system, and things of that nature started to develop, more Africans and people that nature started to get incarcerated. You know what I'm saying? Going up into the 1920s. and going into the 1930s, 1940s, and things of that nature, this prison struggle is developing. Because at that point in time, people got to understand it was more Muslim prisons at that point in time. Because now you got the NOI, you know what I'm saying, the Nation of Islam with Elijah Muhammad in them. A lot of those individuals started to get captured because of their political activity, because of their work. So they're going to prisons and things of that nature, even though it's under a religious type of context, but they had a political consciousness as well. So now you got all these Nation of Islam or these Orthodox Muslims getting captured. They're going to prison. They're transforming individuals behind the wall, giving them a political consciousness and things of that nature. So that's that whole 1920s to 1940s period. But when we get to the 1950s and the 1960s, now you're seeing other prisoners starting to be captured coming from other movements. You know what I'm saying? Whether it's Pan-African or Black nationalist type of individuals who had that type of political consciousness and stuff like that. But even individuals who come from the lumpen proletariat, the street element, the street individuals. A lot of these individuals started to be captured in the 1950s, 1960s, but some of them had a political conscience going to prison. They just were victims of the system. You see what I'm saying? At that point in time, that people couldn't really articulate. So when they get behind these walls during the 1960s, now you're starting to see the New African prison struggle, the Black liberation movement start to develop. Now you got individuals starting to create organizations, prison organizations. And some of those first prison organizations was the Black Guerrilla Family, and other organizations as well. So now you got individuals like W.L. Nolan, who was the Black Guerrilla Family leader at that point in time, and then George Jackson, he's in prison at that point in time. So all these individuals started to learn from this one individual by the name of W.L. Nolan and a couple of other esteemed individuals as well back then. So now it's this whole Pan-African, New African, Black nationalist prison consciousness and struggle start to arise in the 1960s. You know what I'm saying? So we look at that as an extension of the movement outside of the walls. But this movement within inside the walls started to take the torch and take it further at that point in time, because so many of them was getting captured at that point in time. So even when the movement started to come under attack by J. Edgar Hoover, FBI, COINTELPRO, going into the 70s and the 80s and stuff like that, you know what I'm saying, members of the Black Liberation Army are starting to be captured in the 70s and stuff like that, the Black Panther Party. So when these movements started to get destroyed in the 70s, in the 80s and stuff like that, the prison movement was already firm by that point in time. Because now you done had assassinations on George Jackson. You got Jonathan Jackson running up into the court building, trying to free individuals of the Black Guerrilla Family. So now you got this whole Black Guerrilla Family, Black Liberation Army, Republic of New Afrika individuals. They're all behind the walls. And then you have organizations like the New African Prisoners Organization that also sprung up that around that time in the 70s and the 80s, who are developing this political theory of nationalism to revolutionary nationalism. So now where we at today, New African revolutionary nationalism and stuff like that. So it's just this whole big period of time of resistance all the way up until now from the prison struggle, who actually have kept the movement going, because these political minds, these political tacticians and things of that nature are keeping the movements outside the walls active. You know what I'm saying? Because without the prison movement, I'm going to be honest with you, a lot of this would have got destroyed and will be in disarray right now if it wasn't for the prison movement and these intellectuals in the prison system and stuff like that. So yeah, we got to give our salutations to the prison struggle. And I would tell people this, a document that you can go read that speaks on exactly what I'm talking about is by the elder Sundiata Accola. He has a whole document called The Updated History of the New African Prison Struggle. And it takes you from the 18th, 17th, 19th century all the way into the 21st century of the New African prison struggle. You know, just begin to develop and study the history of the New African Independence Movement, study the history of the Republic of New Afrika, study the history pertaining to the whole New African prison struggle. So, because once you start to, do your research on the whole New African prison struggle and its connection to the whole New African Independence Movement, national liberation of New African people and things of that nature, you will also go down the rabbit hole of seeing what our allies was doing, you know what I'm saying, from different revolutionary organizations, our comrades in the white, anti-imperialist movements, the Asians, the Chicanos, you know what I'm saying, and things of that nature. Because all this is simultaneously connected. It's all interconnected at the end of the day. So once you go down that rabbit hole and you start to study the whole New African prison struggle and the national liberation struggle, then you will see the roles of our comrades, of our allies from different movements across the board, and where they came in the movement, you know what I'm saying, and supporting the movement and things of that nature. Because we have always had the support of our allies from the Chicano struggle, the American Indian movement, the Asian movement, our comrades in different even communist organizations and things of that nature. Like I said, our comrades in the white anti-imperialist movements and stuff like that. The Puerto Rican movement, I don't want to leave them out because they had a very important role in this struggle as well. Then you'll see when they came together and started working together to free political prisoners, to help each other's struggles, you know what I'm saying, whether it's pertaining to independence, communalism, community work, you know what I'm saying, social work when it comes to housing, you know what I'm saying, food, clothing, all these different programs, revolutionary programs, whether it comes to, like the, like for instance, I'll give you a prime example, the Lincoln detox struggle. The Young Lords, the Republic of New Afrika, when they took over the Lincoln Detox Center with Dr. Matulu Shakur and all them, and they started to develop these political struggles around our necessities and issues in the community, whether it was drug addiction, all these type of programs, man. And my advice to, the comrades and the allies and things of that nature is just study. That's why Black August is imperative. Is to, retract, reflect, and recommit to the struggle of national liberation for different nationals, oppressed peoples, on the queer movement. I don't want to leave that out as well, because if you go back and look at that as well, the queer movement played very, very important roles when it comes to political prisoners, agitating for the freedom of political prisoners, human rights. You know what I'm saying? This is where it all connects at. Human rights struggle, you know what I'm saying, around various issues that we all have in common amongst our national groups and our nations. Let's just put that in there, our nations and things of that nature. But, my best advice is just study and struggle. Study and struggle. Get with individuals from different organizations, movements, and things of that nature, and see what we have in common. You know what I'm saying? And see where we fit in at. Bring your skills to the table. See where you can fit in at in these struggles and things of that nature. That's why we emphasize in Black August, find you a political organization, join it, and start to work, start to do the work. You know what I'm saying? And things of that nature. And then these relationships will start to develop amongst our allies and our nationals. But what is the objective of that organization? You know what I'm saying? Because we don't need no more, like you said, petty bourgeoisie organizations that put up these fronts like they actually are fighting for Black liberation or national liberation or liberation of oppressed national groups, period. You know what I'm saying? They put up this front, but at the same time, all they doing is they just a bunch of reformist organizations and petty bourgeoisie organizations just on an individualistic tip. They just trying to get a benefit out of it that's not going to help liberate no oppressed people on no level. So yeah, I always try to warn individuals who come into the movements or trying to join organizations, make sure you do your investigation on these organizations, because you could be joining something that is counter-reactionary, counter-revolutionary, and we don't need no more of that, because we know that's the downfall of a lot of movements and struggles, and why a lot of movements and struggles are in a standstill today. You know what I'm saying? They're not moving forward because they're joining petty bourgeoisie organizations that's only in the interest of this capitalist nation. They try to have this, they try to they think that it's things are more separated amongst a lot of the left because they got their own little objectives and agendas and things of that nature that they don't they don't see the connection that, you know what I mean? And some of them do that intentionally, some of them don't. Some of them just not, socially developed to a certain level to understand that these things are all the same and they all connect at the end of the day. But you got a lot of individuals within the left who keep the confusion up because they're only seeking the objectives of their own agendas. You see what I'm saying? So that's what we got to start to, clarify things and the contradictions is addressing those within the left who keep this chaotic confusion up because they only on self-benefit driven, agendas. You got to investigate all that. The nonprofits who only just benefit off of, these capitalist, agendas at the end of the day. So that's why I always tell people investigate first.
All right, cool, man. Hey, thank you so much for doing this. We all definitely appreciate it. I do, and all of us at the Indianapolis Liberation Center.
Man, you're welcome, man. It's an honor always, man, to, get involved with, this type of, thing and stuff like that, man. Like I said, I'm always on standby, man. So
okay.
whatever you need or whatever we collaborate on, man, I'm always here for you, man.